we've concluded our investigation into prokaryotic cells. Now it's time to move on to eukaryotic cells. But before we do that, we need to recover a couple of things. First of all, what are cells? And so if I were to ask you what that question is, cells are the basic building blocks of all organisms, and they are the smallest unit of life that can carry out all of the functions of life. So the question, the corollary to that is, why should we study cells? Well, primarily, selfishly, we should study cells so we can understand how diseases work and how we can better treat them. For example, we understand the mechanism behind sickle cell disease now, and so we've developed a treatment for sickle cell disease that's not just a medicine, but it's actually a way to control the cell that is deficient. And also let us understand how cells work so that we can hopefully in the future treat other sorts of diseases like muscular dystrophy and other diseases that affect lots of people. So to understand the cell is to understand the body. And to understand the body means that we can fix things that are broken, if you will. So it's important that, we talked about prokaryotes and how small prokaryotes are. In fact, we said that prokaryotes are about 1 micron in diameter. About 1 micron in diameter. Now, eukaryotic cells are much larger. Eukaryotic cells are between 10 and 100 times larger, in some cases even more. So we can have our cells vary in size from something that's microscopic, like the cell of a bacterium, to something that is very large, like an ostrich egg. An ostrich egg is a complete cell, right? Now everybody thinks, well, ostrich, that's not just an egg, that's a lot. But the egg itself is the fertilized egg, and that thing that surrounds it are the nutrients that it needs to grow. So inside that eggshell is a complete egg, a growing egg. It is a growing cell. Now, there are cells in your body that are very long. For example, the nerve that runs from your tailbone down to your big toe, called the peroneal nerve, is 3 feet long. Now, the nerve body is really small. It's not 3 feet. It's about 100 microns, if I remember correctly. But that nerve fiber, that extension of that nerve, runs all the way down your leg. So you're talking 3 feet. Some people even longer than that. So cells can be very small and they can be very large. Now, a little bit of history. Let's go back a little bit. Even though we've already talked about it for the microscope test, we're going to talk about it for this test. This information is also intended to be used on this test, so don't neglect it. You need to know that Robert Hooke gave us the term cell. You need to remember that this is actually a picture of what he looked at. These are cork cells. These are the cell walls of cork cells. So that's exactly what he saw in the microscope, and he gave them these names cells because they resembled the cells, the chambers that the monks lived and prayed in, and those were called cells. Now, next person you have to know for this test also is Antoine van Leeuwenhoek. So remember, he published those micrographs, and in that he included images of animalcules, and if you look right here, these are some of the animalcules he saw. This was a human sperm. These are different kinds of flagellates. These are different kinds of protists, but this one was the human sperm that he saw. He saw a lot of these protists in these scrapings of the teeth, remember? And he called these bacteria and these protists, especially the protists because they moved, he called these things animalcules. Now, the big development in the 17th century was the work of Van Leeuwenhoek and Hooke. And, after those two guys did that, there was a lot more work that featured the same type of studies where people improved microscopes and got better images of things and studied those things a little bit better. And all that worked, and then not much changed until the 19th century. But in the 19th century, scientists began to do a lot more comprehensive work. And included in that comprehensive work was that done by Matthias Jakob Schleiden. Matthias Jakob Schleiden. You only need to know his last name, Schleiden, but Schleiden was a botanist. That is, he studied plants. And he was a big fan of microscopy. He did a lot of work on plants, on plant structure in particular. And he came up with one of the fundamental concepts of the cell theory, which was that all plants are made of cells. Again, this is in the early 19th century. This is 1838. And he kept studying plants, and he kept looking at them and figured out every plant that he saw was made of cells. And so in this publication called Contributions to Our Knowledge of Phytogenesis, in 1838, phyto means plant, and genesis means origins. And he said, okay, for the origin of plants, all plants are made of cells. Now, he was a contemporary and a friend of Theodor Schwann. Theodor was a physician and physiologist. He was a very famous physiologist. He would make several discoveries, including the digestive enzyme pepsin and the discovery of cells named after him, Schwann cells, which are cells that support the nerves. And in 1837, as a result of a conversation to Schleiden about plant cells and the fact that all plants are made of cells, he began to do an investigation similar to that of Schleiden on animals. And in 1838, he made the same observations about animal cells. So make that correction on that date. It's not 1338, it's 1838. He made the same observation about animal cells. That is, that all animals are made of cells. So, about the same time, I'm sorry, I forgot this other one. He also declared that all living things are made of cells and cell products. And that's important. When we talk about cells and cell products, what he was talking about were things like collagen, which is secreted by the cells, and the extracellular matrix, which is secreted by the cells. So he went a little bit further than Schleiden did. He said, not only are they made of cells, but they're made also of cell products. He also gave us this concept that the cell is the unit of structure, physiology, and organization in living things. And then what that means is that the cell is the basic unit of structure and function in all living things, spoken like a true physiologist. And he finally told us that, look, the cell's a distinct thing. It can live on its own. Some cells can live on their own, and there are some cells that are building blocks of organisms. So he said, okay, you might have a cell that lives on its own, but you may also have a cell that is part of a living organism that cannot live on its own. It's part of that organism and requires that organism to live. Now, the next guy you need to know is a guy named Rudolf Virchow. Rudolf Virchow. He's another German guy. Lots of German stuff going on there. He's recognized as the father of modern pathology. Virchow did several major pathological studies, which means he studied cells and disease. Now, his big contribution to the cell theory is omnis cellula e cellula, which means all cells come from cells. Now, he's given credit for doing that, but most likely he plagiarized that idea from a guy named Robert Remak. Remak, about 10 years before Virchow published his theory. About 10 years before that, Remak mentioned it in a paper that he wrote. So it's a bit of plagiarization, but we still, we talk about the people who are responsible for the cell theory, and you do have to know that. It's Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow. Right? 3 German guys, Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow. Okay? Now, what is the cell theory? Well, the modern cell theory states these 3 principles, and you have to know these principles. You're going to have to know them. So write them down, make sure that you know them. All living things are made of cells. All living things are made of cells. The cell is the basic unit of living things. I would prefer that you put it like this. The cell is the basic unit of structure and function in living things. The cell is a basic unit of structure and function in living things. And finally, all cells come from pre-existing cells. All cells come from pre-existing cells. That means that cells just don't come out of nowhere. There's just not, one day there's a cell. They come from other cells. So now, the rest of the period, go to www.edpuzzle.com. Okay, then you're going to log into Edpuzzle and you're going to click the plus symbol and enter your class code. The class code for this class is ZASTIZI. Again, class code for this class is ZASTIZI. Okay, then you have to watch the video that's called The Wacky History of Cell Theory and answer the questions. There are 5 questions. Each question's worth 3 points. So this is a 15-point exercise. Now, it's due tomorrow morning before 7. So you have plenty of time to watch it in class. So don't mess around and not do your job. Watch this in class. It's worth 15 points. Each question's worth 3 points. Now, if you're not sure about an answer to a question, I haven't prevented you from going back and rewatching that section. So if you're not sure about an answer to a question, back up till you find the answer for that question and then answer the question. There's no reason for you not to make a 15 out of 15. Again, if you don't know an answer, back up, find the answer, and then answer the question correctly. You can't re-answer. So once you answer the question, you got it wrong, it's going to be wrong. But you have the opportunity to go back before you answer the question and make sure you know the answer. Okay, go ahead and take your Chromebooks out and get started.